In this video, I'm going to show you how to learn mathematics from start to finish. We're going to start with the very basics and work our way up. I'm going to give you 3 different ways to get started with mathematics. They're all different and all of them are okay starting points for learning mathematics. If you like, you can start with all 3 at the same time, which makes it really cool. One way to get started with mathematics is by starting with algebra. And this is actually the most common way that people start learning math, is by learning basic algebra. So this book here is called Pre-Algebra Mathematics, and it's by Nichols. And this is a great book for learning just the very basics of algebra. Now, if you feel like you know some basic algebra and want to start with something a little more advanced, this one here is a more modern book, and it's called Elementary Algebra, and it's by Sullivan, Struve, and Mozzarella. And this one is really nice. It's got tons of examples, and it should teach you all of the algebra you need in order to proceed in mathematics. I'll try to leave links to all of these books in the description of this video. Another way to get started with mathematics is to actually start with discrete math. And this is a really unconventional approach. At most colleges and universities in the United States, typically you have to take Calculus 2 before jumping into discrete math. However, a lot of the math in discrete math books you can actually learn without knowing any calculus or without really having a strong command of algebra. So let's go through and look at each of these books, and I'll tell you who they're for. So this first one here is called Discrete Mathematical Structures, and it's by Coleman, Busby, and Ross. And this is a super beginner-friendly book. So this book starts with really basic math and proceeds from there. In particular, this book will teach you logic, which is basically a precursor to understanding how to write mathematical proofs. And once you know how to write basic math proofs, you can go into math beyond calculus. So nothing says that you can't start with a book like this. Again, this is the one by Coleman, Busby, and Ross. A more advanced book is this one here. It's called Concrete Mathematics by Graham, Knuth, and Patashnik. This is a very famous book because it's written by very famous people. In particular, Knuth is a super famous computer science professor at Stanford who created TeX, which is what LaTeX is based on, I believe, which is what's used to create math symbols in modern books today. So, legendary book written by a legendary computer scientist. This book actually has answers to all of the problems in the back of the book, which is really cool. However, this book is way more advanced than this one, so this one is not for beginners in my opinion. Then here we have 2 standard books on discrete math. Both of these are also pretty tough. This one is Discrete Math by Rosen, and this one is Discrete Math by Grimaldi. Both of these books are widely used in the United States in discrete math courses. These books are tough reads, they take a lot of effort to get through, but they're both solid discrete math books. So another way to start again is to basically pick up one of these books and learn the logic and proof stuff in these books, which will help you for higher math. Finally, the third way to get started with math is to just jump into the proof writing, which I think is super fun. So here we have a couple books. We have How to Prove It, A Structured Approach by Daniel Velman. We have Foundations of Higher Mathematics by Fletcher and Patty, An Introduction to Abstract Mathematics by Bond and Keene, and How to Read and Do Proofs by Daniel Solo. So all of these books are awesome. Let me just talk about each one briefly. So this one here I've had for a really long time, several years, and I think it's a great book. I taught an independent study many years ago with just a handful of students, and this was a book that I recommended to them, and they thought it was pretty good. They didn't think it was amazing, but they thought it was pretty good. I think it's amazing, and I'm a big fan of this book. Great for learning to write proofs. Another one very similar to this one is the one by Fletcher and Patty. This is one that was recommended to me here on the channel by several people, so I finally bought it, and I think it's awesome. This book will teach you how to write proofs. This one was recommended to me by a former professor. It's called How to Read and Do Proofs by Daniel Solo. Again, another excellent choice when you want to learn how to write proofs. And I have to say that my favorite one now out of these 4 is this one, How to Prove It, A Structured Approach by Daniel Velman. This one is really affordable. In fact, most of these books should be quite affordable, but this one might be especially affordable, and it's especially good. He spends a lot of time explaining things, and he always falls back on the logic, which is absolutely key when you're trying to learn mathematics. This book is awesome, and I cannot recommend it enough. He explains things in more than one way, so when you don't get it, He has sometimes an alternate explanation, which I think makes this an incredible book for anyone who wants to learn how to write math proof. Okay, so now that you know how to get started with math, and again, you have three choices. You can start with basic algebra, you can start with proof writing, or you can really jump into it and start with discrete math. What's next? What can you possibly learn next in math? Well, let's keep going and we'll go through more math topics that you can learn once you know these. So in order to learn calculus, you really need to learn more algebra and some trigonometry. So to do that, people usually go to college and they take a course called Pre-Calculus and they take a course called Trigonometry. And with those two courses, they learn enough mathematics to take calculus. Pre-Calculus is basically just like a blend of random topics that come up in courses like calculus. So let's go through each of these books and talk about what's in them. This is a solid book on pre-calc and it has everything you need in order to learn calculus. This is the one by Stewart, Redlin, and Watson. James Stewart was a very famous Canadian mathematician who passed away several years ago. He's known for his book titled Calculus, which is probably the most popular calculus book in the US. This book is great. It has everything you need to study calculus, and I definitely recommend it. This one is called College Algebra by Blitzer, and this is basically just an algebra book that is a little more advanced than the algebra book I showed you earlier. So this will basically teach you the algebra you need in order to study calculus. However, having this book is not enough because you still need some trig. Note, this book, Pre-Calculus, also contains the trig that you need. So if you got something like this, that should cover all of the math you need. Whereas this one just teaches you algebra, but I wanted to include it because it's definitely an option and it's probably really affordable. I'll try to leave links in the description to all of these books. A really popular book that I've actually used to teach pre-calculus and trig, and a combined course in pre-calc trig, is this one here. It's called A Graphical Approach to Algebra and Trigonometry, and this is the one by Hornsby, Lyle, and Roxwold. And I really like this book. I like the examples, I like the exercises, and I like the explanations. Again, just another option so that you can go further and study calculus. A very similar one is Algebra and Trig, and this is by Stewart, Redlin, and Watson. Very similar to this one, just so you have more options. And just so you have even more options, because I know sometimes books can get expensive, here's one by Michael Sullivan, which is also fantastic. So this book is very similar to this one, which is very similar to this one. So any of these books should do the job. Here we have a more specialty book. This one is called Shalm's Outline Series of Trigonometry, and this is just trig. So if you do get this book, I still think it's worth getting one of these big, thick algebra and trig books because you just need one, right? Once you have one, that's usually good enough. If you're wondering why I have so many books, it's because I collect math books. If you want an older book on algebra and trig that's not too hard, the one by Cameron is pretty good. It's kind of an interesting look at the way math used to be taught. I really like this book, and it's much, much thinner than the big, newer, modern books. If you want a thicker, older book, I think this one is really cool, and it has really hard problems. It's called Pre-Calculus Mathematics, and it's by Shanks, Brumfield, Fleener, and Eichholz. This book is way harder than a lot of the modern books, and it's probably pretty affordable. I'll try to leave some links in the description for you, but I really like this book. I'm just going to smell it here. Oh, it smells so good. Old school book on pre-calc math. It's always fun to get these older books because you get different problems. This one here is really unique. This is actually a workbook on trig. So if you're taking trig now, or if you decide to learn trig on your own, this book is totally different from every book I've shown you because what you can do with this book is you can actually write in the book, you see? And it has answers to every single problem. Now, this book doesn't have everything you need for trig in it like the other books do, but it has the hard stuff in it and it gives you tons of practice problems. So I feel like Chris McMullen, who wrote this book, knows what trig students struggle with, and he made an entire book to focus on those topics. And the last one's kind of unique. It's an entire book on just trig. I wanted to include it because you don't really see too many books on just trigonometry anymore. Most of the modern books are pre-calculus or algebra and trig books. This one is just trig, and it's by by Rice and Strange. This is an older book, and it's been around for a super long time. So now you're at the point where you know some basic algebra and you know some trigonometry. It's time to jump into calculus. And you shouldn't feel like you need to be an expert in either algebra and trig to jump in. Sure, if your skills are weak, you're going to struggle more, but don't let anything stop you from exploring the higher levels of math that we're going to discuss in this book. If you feel like reading a book on advanced math, you should read it. That's the whole point of self-study. So let's start with this one because this is a book I've never talked about here on the channel. This one is Calculus with Analytic Geometry, and it's by Swakowski. Great book. I don't know if it's still in print, but I'll try to find it and leave information for you. This one is a little bit different than a lot of the other books I'm going to show you, but it's got tons of calculus in it, pretty much everything you need, but it is an older book, so you get a different take on the subject. A more modern book, and one I've used to teach Calculus 1, 2, and 3, is the one by Larson and Edwards. I've read major portions of this book, and I've done a ton of the exercises. Great book for calculus, so everything you need for Calc 1, 2, and 3 is in this book. A legendary book on calculus is this one. It's called Tomas Calculus, and this book has been around for a while. This is the 13th edition. I actually have older copies of this book, older editions rather, of this book, and I think it's awesome. This book is incredible. It's got tons of exercises, great explanations, and again, everything you need just to give you another choice. And the third or fourth really big, thick calculus book I want to show you is the one by James Stewart. This is perhaps the most popular calculus book, probably in the world, at least in the US and Canada. This is the same James Stewart who wrote the pre-calc book, which I showed you earlier. And just look how thick these books are. So any of these books is awesome. You really only need one of these. Again, I have more than one. When I took calculus, I used the early Transcendentals version of this book. And again, I used the Larson book here to teach calculus. So any of these should teach you all the calculus you know. However, books are hard to read, so I wanted to show you these other books I have here, which are super affordable. Okay, these are really, really inexpensive. You know, these books are expensive, right? But these are super affordable. So what are these? So this is a book that will teach you some of the stuff that you learn in Calculus 1. It's like some of the single variable stuff. It also has some Calc 2 topics in it. And this book is awesome because you can write in it, you see? And it has full solutions in the back of the book to all the problems. It's written by Chris McMullen, and it's super popular and super amazing. However, I think this one is better. This book is not as popular, and the reason I think this book is better is because this book is on multivariable calculus, and it has examples in multivariable calculus in it that will help you when you're using these books to learn. One of the things that people struggle with these books is having enough examples. You know, like if you just buy the Stewart book, you're going to get some examples, but there's going to be exercises in the book for which the examples are lacking, or you're going to feel like you need more help. It's these books or other books that provide more help. So awesome book, definitely recommended for anyone who is taking a multivariable calculus course or learning Calculus 3, and super affordable compared to these books here. Now that you know some calculus, it's time to jump into differential equations. And while I have a lot of books on differential equations, I just chose 3 for this video here because these are some that I've actually spent a lot of time with. So let's start with this one here. This is the Shams outline on differential equations. And this is a really good Shams outline. This one's pretty good. Some Shams outlines are better than others. This is one of the better ones. It's not the best one. I still think the best Shams is the one on complex variables or the one on topology, but this one's really, really good. It's got a lot of examples and pretty much everything you need. I think you could, in theory, use this to learn DE on your own, but I still think it's better just to use it as a supplement. Now, this one here is the one I used when I took differential equations as an undergrad a long time ago. This one is by Nagel, Saf, and Snyder. Great book, solid examples, tons of content, has answers to the odd problems. It's just a really nice, modern, standard book on differential equations. And the one I used to teach differential equations for many years is this one here by Dennis Zill, a first course in differential equations. I do think this book is easier than this one. You'll notice it's a lot thinner, but that's because this one includes the boundary value problems. But great book. It's worth having more than one book because it's a hard subject to learn on your own. So all of these are totally worth getting. Let's talk a little bit about probability and statistics. So this is something you can learn, and we could have learned this before, but I didn't want to talk about it until now because some of this does require calculus. So this is the Shams on probability and statistics. Very affordable, worth having if you want to have it. I recommend it. It's got tons of examples in both probability and statistics. But I still think it's better to have a textbook. So here's a book that's perfect for beginners in statistics. It's by Weiss, and it's called Elementary Statistics. This one is the 8th edition. So this is like your standard modern book on statistics. And there's other books like this on statistics. I just really picked this one at random because I think it's pretty good. So tons of examples, and it will teach you statistics. After you know basic statistics, you can jump into something like this. This one is Mathematical Statistics and Data Analysis by John Rice. And this is the India edition. I bought this edition because I was able to save some money, but it was still pretty expensive. This book has a lot of math in it. Some of it does require calculus, but it's an advanced book, so you can expect to struggle to learn the material. And then I left this one for the end. This is a really nice little thin book, which has some fantastic examples in it. It's called A First Course in Probability by Sheldon Ross. And you can read lots of this book without calculus, but as you can see here, there's a triple integral there. So you see, you will need some calculus for a lot of this book. So those are some options for learning statistics. As for geometry, a book that is often used is this one here. It's Geometry by Jurgensen, and there's definitely a newer edition out than this one, and I'll leave the information in the description, but this is a standard book on geometry that has been used for a very, very long time. So worth getting if you are looking for a book on geometry. Okay, it's time to talk about linear algebra. So first let's talk about the shams. This one is really nice because it has lots of examples and a lot of topics that you sometimes won't find in other linear algebra books. So it's very, very comprehensive, and it serves as a good reference and as a good source of additional problems. Still, I think it's better to have a regular textbook. So let's talk about the books I have here. So out of these three here, the best one for beginners is this one. This is Elementary Linear Algebra by Howard Anton. And there's other really good beginner linear algebra books out there. I just wanted to pick one for this video because, well, we're going over a lot of books, so I didn't want too many books. So this one is really good for beginners because the problems in it are very standard. So if you are taking a class in linear algebra and you have a test coming up, if you open this book and you go to the specific section, for example, maybe you're studying subspaces, and you go through and you do these examples and you do these exercises for practice, there's a chance that some of these questions might show up on your test. And the reason is, it's just very standard in the presentation. So it has problems that you'll find in most linear algebra books. Definitely recommend it, very affordable. It's the one by Anton. These books are more advanced. This one is older, this one is newer. So this one is a classic book on linear algebra, and it's proof-based. Now, while the Anton book does have proofs, this one is a lot more sophisticated. And this one is kind of like a modern version of this one. This one is really good because it serves as a great reference, and I've used the index multiple times to look things up whenever I've needed to look things up. So worth having, super affordable. It's the Linear Algebra by Friedberg. So proof-based linear algebra, beginner linear algebra, a supplement for linear algebra. Complex variables. Some people say that this is the most interesting course you can take as an undergraduate. And so here I have a bunch of books, and they're all really, really good. So the Shams for complex variables is considered by many people to be the best Shams outline ever written, ever. Like, it's so good because it has everything you need. I mean, in theory, you could just use this and learn everything that is taught in a complex variables course. It is such a good book. Now, having said that, I still think it's better to have a book, but if you're studying complex variables, get the Shams. And if you have to buy one Shams, get this one because it's that good. So this one here is perhaps the most popular complex variables book in the world, in the sense that it has been used for so many years and so many people have used this book, for decades. This is the 7th edition. I'm not sure if there's a newer one. It's by Brown and Churchill, and it's an introductory level complex variables book. So that means that you only need, some calculus for this. You should know how to compute like partial derivatives and stuff like that, which you basically learn in Calc 3. So beginner book for complex variables. This one is also a beginner level book on complex variables. It's by Saf and Snyder, and it's really hard for me to say that one is better than the other. I'm going to just come out and say it and be biased. I like this one a little bit better because this is the one that I used when I was an undergrad. But honestly, I think I'm a little bit biased in saying that because this one's also really good. These books are very, very similar in content, and either of these books should help you learn complex variables. So if you want to learn complex variables, my advice is get one of these and get the Shams. So what's under here? Let me show you. This one I actually bought before any of these books. It's a Dover book, so it's super inexpensive. And I bought this book when I was in Calc 3 because I wanted to learn some advanced mathematics on my own. It's by Detman, and I remember reading this while sitting at the dentist thinking, oh, this is really cool. I can learn complex variables, yes. So fun little book, very, very affordable, and it has a lot of mathematics in it. This one is way more advanced than these. I wanted to give you a more advanced book on complex variables. It's the one by Ablowitz and Focus. This has a lot of material that you won't find in these other books here. Let's look at some partial differential equations. So in order to study partial differential equations, you basically need some differential equations. So you definitely need to know ordinary differential equations. So those books I showed you earlier are a must-have. And the good news is you will use a lot of the things you learn in ordinary differential equations in order to solve partial differential equations. A lot of times you'll take a PDE, which stands for partial differential equation, and you'll use some technique, and you'll end up with an ordinary differential equation, and you'll use what you learned from those other books to solve problems in these books. So I put this one first because it's very affordable, and it's a Dover book. It's by Zach Manoglu and Tho. Great book on PDEs. This is one that I used for a course. Really good book. The only downside is there are some mistakes in the answers, which can cause you a lot of pain, but it's a really nice book with a really fancy cover. The Shams outline on PDEs, I had to include that because it does help a little bit. And then this one here is actually really affordable. I believe this is a Dover reprint, so you can find it through Dover. And it's by Miller. This is a great book for getting started with partial differential equations. Abstract algebra is one of my favorite subjects, and I have over 40 books, but I've picked only a few here just to show you. So let's talk about each of these, and I'll tell you who they're for. So this one is called A First Course in Abstract Algebra, and it was written by John B. Frelay. This was mentioned to me by my former professor, and he thought that this was a great book. So I bought it, and I also think it's a great book. There are some things in this book that are a little bit different from other books, but it's still worth having, and it's got a lot of abstract algebra in it. It's intended for beginners, and I like it a lot. I wouldn't say it's the easiest beginner book, but it's definitely considered a beginner book. This next one is Contemporary Abstract Algebra by Joseph Galleon. I have a friend who lives in New Zealand, and he has a PhD in math, and when he was in college as an undergrad, this is the book he used. And so he told me about it, so I went online and I bought a copy several years ago. This book is really good because it has a lot of examples that you won't find in other abstract algebra books like the one by Frelay. I always think of this as the book of examples for that reason alone. So great book. It's got a lot of abstract algebra in it and tons of examples. Another book, which I think is easier than both of these, is this one here, Abstract Algebra, A First Course by Dan Serachino. This one is much easier than these books in my opinion, so this one is better for beginners. But again, they're all considered beginner books. These books have more content than this one does, but again, this one is better for beginners. Another one which I really like is this one here. Again, a beginner book. And this one I actually used to do self-study. I taught myself field theory using this book. I started with the section on polynomials and then worked my way up from there. And I did that while I was in graduate school because I used this book as an undergrad and I didn't learn enough math from this book, so I had to supplement on my own, and I got it from this book. And out of all the books I have, out of all the abstract algebra books I have, which are not even in this video, this is the one I picked for that. So this book to me is really special, and I think it's really amazing, and it's just, yeah, I don't think it gets the attention it deserves. This one is a classic book. It's considered graduate level by many people. It's called Algebra by Michael Artin. And so this one's way more advanced than any of these, and this one takes a very linear algebra focused approach. Michael has really good examples and really good exercises and places a heavy emphasis on linear algebra. This next one I want to show you is the one by Dummett and Foote. This one, I believe, In my opinion, I like this one better because this one has a better index. So as a reference, this one is a better book than this one. And it just has a lot of math and a lot of exercises in it. My copy is falling apart. Let me show you. You see, and I bought it used, so maybe I should have gotten a new copy. I saved a few dollars by buying it used. Looking back in hindsight, I just should have spent the money on a new copy. In fact, after I bought this book and I was disappointed, I bought a new copy of this one. So this one has way more math than all of these. It has more topics. This is the one by the late Serge Lang, and many people consider this to be like the Bible of abstract algebra. This has a ton of abstract algebra in it, and it's recommended for anyone who is serious about abstract algebra. Okay, now it is time to discuss advanced calculus or real analysis. And this is all undergraduate level real analysis here. And we're going to talk about each of these books and the pros and cons and who they're for. So this first one is super famous. I'm sure you've heard of it. And if you haven't, it's called Principles of Mathematical Analysis, and it's by Rudin. And this is known by many people to be a very dry, hard, rigorous book. I had a friend who read the entire book, and he didn't do the exercises, but he read the entire book and tried to work through all of the theorems. And he got stuck and he did what he could, but he worked from the beginning to the end. And yeah, so you can learn a lot of mathematics from a book like this, but it does take a lot of effort. And there are other approaches that might make your road to learning analysis a little bit easier. So this next book, I'm going to go out of order here. This one is Advanced Calculus by Fitzpatrick. This is perhaps one of the easiest advanced calculus books out there. Now, when I was using this book to learn, I certainly did not feel that way. Instead, I felt like advanced calculus was consuming my life. And that's because it's super hard to learn this stuff, right? This is not easy mathematics, but this is one of the easier books. It's the one by Fitzpatrick. Another really easy book that I bought maybe only a few years ago is this one here by Bartle and Sherbert. Initially, I had checked this book out of a library when I was a student, and I thought, what a great book, because it gave me an alternate explanation when trying to learn things while I was using this book. So I thought that this was a great supplement to this book. So definitely worth getting if you can find it. Again, I'll try to look for it. I don't know, the status of this book, if it's still in print, if it's easy to find, but it's really, really fantastic. Very, very happy with this book. And of course, I had to include a book by Lang. This is his book on Analysis 1, an excellent text. And Understanding Analysis by Abbott, also a very, very wonderful text for learning basic undergraduate analysis. And I've left my favorite of these for last. It's this one here. It's Advanced Calculus by Buck. This one starts with the multivariable approach. So it starts with like calculus of one variables, and then it also talks about calculus of n variables. So you have statements regarding like n-dimensional space and stuff early on in the book. Also, it's got a ton of math in it. So awesome book. Definitely recommend it. Advanced Calculus by Buck. So here we have 3 books for learning number theory. This one is Elementary Number Theory by Underwood Dudley. We have Number Theory by George Andrews, and we have Elementary Introduction to Number Theory, and this one is by Long. So all of these books are excellent for learning number theory. You can just pick any of these and you'll be good to go. I've had this one way longer than these, and I've spent more time with this one. And great book. I'm just going to give it a whiff here just because it smells so good. There's newer editions of this out now. Oh yeah, what a wonderful book. Yeah, awesome books. As far as graph theory, here's a pretty good choice. It's called Graph Theory by Ronald Gould. Now keep in mind that those discrete math books that I showed you at the beginning of the video, those actually do cover graph theory, and they also cover combinatorics. So you learn a lot of math with those discrete math books. And that's why I gave that as an option for learning math, so you can see the different types of math that is out there. So yeah, this is a really solid book on graph theory. Topology is typically a course that math students take their senior year as undergraduates. So here we have a few books. Let's talk about each. First, let's start with the Shams. And this, again, is one of the best Shams out there, I think. So this one and the one for complex variables, in my opinion, are just rock solid. And the reason I think they're so good is because they're very standard in their topics. They contain things that you're going to see in your course if you take a course in college. So really great resource for extra proofs and extra examples and extra knowledge. So again, it's the Shams on general topology. This one here is an older book, and it's a classic. It's Introduction to Topology by Bert Mendelson, and this is the second edition. So it's an older book on topology, and it's probably quite affordable, and very, very standard in the treatment. This one is awesome because it actually has full solutions to all of the exercises in the back of the book, including the proofs, right? They'll give you partial proofs or, pretty good hints to all of the problems. So great book, very affordable because it's a Dover book. It's the one by Galleon and Green. And this one's like the standard, often used to teach advanced undergrads or beginning graduate students. It's called Topology, and it's by Munkries. Great book. It's not going to have all the answers like this one does, but it does have a lot of mathematics, and it's worth having. My copy is the Eastern Economy edition because I was able to save some money by getting this version versus the other edition. So all of these are awesome. I recommend all of them. And if you're taking topology now, or you buy one of these books and you start reading it and you struggle, just know it's normal. I didn't include topology until now in the video because I feel like you definitely want to have some advanced calculus before you jump into topology, just so your proofwriting skills are sufficient. Topology can destroy people if they don't know how to write proofs, so you need to have a solid command on your proofwriting skills before jumping into something as cool as topology. I want to finish this video with just a bunch of random books on different things that I thought were really, really cool, and I think these are all amazing. So this first one here is called All the Math You Missed But Need to Know for Graduate School, and it was written by Tomas Calculus. So I had the pleasure of actually interviewing Tomas Calculus a while ago here on the channel, and he is super smart, super awesome, and I think he's a great guy. And he wrote this amazing book, and this book covers tons of mathematics, tons. Let me just show you really briefly all the math in this book. So you can't learn all the math in this book, but look, these are all the topics. Here's a brief summary. Linear algebra, real analysis, look at all that. All of that math, right, in one book. And he basically gives you the overview of each of the subjects in this one book. So incredible book, super affordable, worth having. It just opens your eyes to all of the mathematics out there. Thank you for writing such a wonderful book, Mr. Tomas Calculus. This next book is one that I don't think I've ever talked about. It's a book on cryptography. This is a book that I've read almost 100% through. I've almost read the entire book. This is the international edition. I bought that one to save a little bit of money, and I used this book for a course in graduate school, and our teacher was really hardcore, and he went through the entire book. So I spent many, many nights eating pizza, staying up late with my friend, trying to understand all of the algorithms and stuff in this book. It's a really good book, and we covered a lot of material, let me just say that. Worth it if you want to learn cryptography. This next one is awesome for anyone studying engineering, physics, or math. It's the legendary Advanced Engineering Mathematics by Chrysig. This book has so much mathematics in it. It is completely insane. Let me see if I can find the contents just to show you. So it starts with some differential equations, more DEs, Laplace transforms, that's more DEs. So DEs, a full DE course, vector analysis. So you got some multivariable calculus here, so like calculus 3. So you've got differential equations, some calculus 3. Then he jumps into some linear algebra, matrices and determinants. So already, you've got 2 full courses here. Fourier series and integrals, partial differential equations. Then here you've got some complex analysis. So, calculus 3, complex analysis. It's got some linear algebra. It's got some regular DEs. It's got some calc 3. Just so much mathematics in this wonderful book. And it's just written in a very clean way. So worth getting, definitely recommended for anyone in physics, engineering, or math. This next one is a graduate level book on measure theory. It's called Real and Complex Analysis, and it's the one by Rudin. This is the Rudin book. And again, it's a classic. It's basically the follow-up to the Principles of Mathematical Analysis book that I showed you earlier by Rudin. So topics here are much more advanced. These are things that you would learn as a first-year graduate student. And the next book I want to show you is one that's also considered a graduate level book. It's the one by Cryzig on functional analysis. This one's really good for beginners. Before reading this book, you're going to want to have a strong command on proofwriting. Maybe you've had some topology before you read this. Some exposure to metric spaces would be good. The book does cover all that, but having prior exposure always helps. Wonderfully written book on functional analysis, perhaps the best introductory book on the subject. And the last book is one that took me a long time to buy. I just wanted to include it in this video because I finally bought it. It took me a long time to buy this because it's expensive. It's not inexpensive. You can't find it inexpensively. It's always expensive. And it's by Serge Lang. It's called Basic Mathematics, and it has a bunch of strange topics in it. Like, it doesn't really fit in anywhere else. I can't really categorize it. And it basically just has some basic mathematics. Let me just show you what's in this book so you can see the topic. It starts with numbers, linear equations, real numbers, quadratic equations, logic, right? So you wouldn't expect that. Some geometry, segments, rays, and lines, trigonometry, functions, mapping. So just complex numbers, just a lot of random topics. And it does have answers in the back of the book to the problems. Let me just show you the answers. So answers to selected exercises. So it does have answers. So a nice book, worth getting if you decide to spend the money. It took me a long time to buy it because I didn't want to spend the money, especially on a paperback. That's really what bothered me. I'm just going to give it a whiff. Oh, yeah, very happy to finally have this book. And I just love the color too, the yellow cover. It's just very, very cool. So that's it. I just wanted to show you how to get started with mathematics and how to learn a ton of mathematics. And again, you have 3 ways to start. You can start by learning some basic algebra, and it doesn't necessarily have to be pre-algebra. If you feel like you know some algebra, maybe just get one of those algebra and trig books I showed you at the beginning of the video. If you want to learn to write proofs, pick up a proof writing book. And if you want to learn some discrete math, pick up a discrete math book. In my opinion, the best way to start is to start with all of them, right? And if you feel like you're ready for calculus, jump into it. Don't be afraid to dive into more advanced mathematics, even if you think you won't understand it. You know, if you buy one of these books and it's too advanced, who knows? Maybe a year from now you'll pick it up and you'll start reading it because you'll be ready for it then. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, good luck and take care.